Close your eyes and for a moment forget that familiar apocalypse. Imagine yourself at midnight, walking the deserted streets of an abandoned town. Not a single click, not a single groan. Moonlight lights up silhouettes on the rooftops, shapes you've never seen before. A draft slips through a shattered window, rustling the dusty leaves on the floor. The silence is so dense it's almost deafening. Then suddenly, from the heart of the darkness, a sharp scream tears through the air. A flock of birds bursts into the sky in panic. But there's something wrong with these birds. Filthy fungal filaments dangle between their wings. Their eyes are vacant, chalk white. Feathers dusted with spores fall onto the street below like a quiet kind of death. In The Last of Us, humans became infected. Yet what if this nightmare wasn't ours alone? What if nature rewrote its own rules and turned every living thing into a weapon?
To see why this scenario is so terrifying, we must first examine Cordyceps, the fungus at its core.
In the real world, this genus is infamous for the horrifying control it exerts over ants and other insects. The notorious species Cordyceps unilateralis seizes an ant and turns it into a true zombie. It forces the ant to climb to a leaf with just the right humidity and height for spore dispersal. There, the ant clamps its jaws down one last time and dies. The rest is grim. The fungus erupts from the victim's head and showers spores downward. So why doesn't this happen to humans? The answer is simple: body temperature. Our average of 37 degrees C and our advanced immune system act like a natural oven for these fungi. Cordyceps can't infect a mammal, let alone a human, and often not even a different ant species. Under normal conditions, it's impossible. But The Last of Us shows us how normal conditions can change in the worst way. Remember that infamous TV program from 1968?
What if, for instance, the world were to get slightly warmer? Well, now, there is reason to evolve. One gene mutates, and an Ascomycetia, Candida, ergot, Cordyceps, Aspergillus, any one of them could become capable of burrowing into our brains and taking control not of millions of us, but billions of us. Billions of puppets with poisoned minds.
So if that happens,
we lose.
The scientist warned that in a warming world, fungi could evolve to tolerate hotter bodies. That's exactly what happened in the Last of Us universe. Global warming triggered Cordyceps, and the fungus underwent a lethal mutation that adapted it to the human body.
Even though this may sound like science fiction, our real world is already giving us small warning signs.
Take Candida auris, discovered in 2009. This fungus tolerates higher temperatures and spreads from person to person in hospitals, one of the rare ones that does. It might be nature's way of saying, be ready. As mycologists like to remind us, in biology, nothing is truly impossible. And now we're asking the darkest what if of all. What if Cordyceps didn't stop at humans and leapt to animals too? If animals became infected, every balance in The Last of Us would collapse. Safe zone would become a meaningless phrase. Picture it, the sky is no longer a symbol of freedom, but the direction the deadliest threat comes from. Flocks of crows and pigeons above the cities would turn into biological bombs, carrying spores for miles. Imagine a wave of infected pigeons screaming as they cut across a rooftop. All they leave behind is a deadly cloud of spores drifting in the air, seeping into every crack, every open window. Airborne transmission risk would soar to unthinkable levels. Even breathing inside your hideout could become a gamble, and migratory birds could ferry the disease across continents. A town that stayed safe for years might turn to hell in a single morning when infected gulls descend from the sky.
But what about the danger on the ground, humankind's most loyal companions?
Stray dogs left behind after society's fall, or wild wolves, already a threat. Now Cordyceps commands these predators' minds too. Picture a wolf pack hunting through a silent neighborhood, eyes crazed with the fungus's hunger. Remember how WLF's trained dogs tracked Ellie by scent in part this too? How tense those moments felt. Now that mechanic turns merciless. infected dogs could fuse their razor-sharp sense of smell with the fungus's drive, sniffing out shelters. Moving through cities wouldn't just mean avoiding clickers, it would also mean staying one step ahead of these four-legged silent hunters. And when intelligence enters the picture, if Cordyceps jumped to primates, the result would be catastrophic. In the original story, we learned about infected chimpanzees killing a scientist at the Eastern Colorado University lab. Now imagine that savagery unleashed into the wild. Infected monkeys slipping between branches, laying traps with unsettling cunning. An orangutan trying to open doors, raining stones from the treetops. That would be even more terrifying than the unpredictability of clickers.
But the real apocalypse would not come from the loudest, but from the quietest ones.
Ironically, in real life, Cordyceps favors insects most of all. If a mutation swept through insect species, this wouldn't be a personal survival fight anymore. It would be a full-scale ecological collapse. Think about it. If pollinators like bees and butterflies turned zombie and stopped doing their jobs, plants couldn't reproduce. Fields would fail, forests would fall silent, birds would feed on infected insects, mice would eat spore-laden flies, and the entire food chain would poison itself. Humanity's last scraps of food and clean water from nature would vanish. And the worst part, billions of infected insects pumping spores into the air would make it unbreathable. Stepping outside without a mask for a few minutes could be a death sentence. Our pets, the cats and dogs we trust at night, could turn into monsters inside our homes. And if livestock, cattle, chickens were infected, that would spell the end of humanity's remaining food sources.
So, in such a world, how would the balance of power look in the Last of Us universe?
FEDRA, the Fireflies, the WLF, their struggle would lose all meaning. The common enemy would now be nature itself. What could FEDRA's massive quarantine walls do against a flock coming from above? Their rule would likely grow even harsher, declaring forests and suburbs infected colonies and attempting large-scale burn-downs. Shoot-on-sight orders for any bird approaching the walls. And the Fireflies' sacred mission, finding a vaccine for Cordyceps? When infection prowls through all of nature, what use is a vaccine? Even if you were vaccinated, a pack of infected bears wouldn't be stopped by a syringe. The Fireflies might give up on a cure and pivot to developing a biological weapon that could wipe the fungus out entirely. Would human civil wars end? Unlikely. But groups like the WLF would swap dog patrols for special hunter units to track infected wildlife. The primary threat wouldn't be the faction across the street anymore, but the claws and fangs lurking in the dark. Now slide into the player's seat. Bow and arrow in hand, you're guiding Ellie. Remember the first time we had to fight a dog in Part 2, how we all hesitated. We had to mask our scent and keep moving. Now that idea multiplies. Listening mode wouldn't just pick up clickers. It would become crucial for catching a distant howl, a snapping branch, or a flock taking sudden flight. The game might even add a tracking mechanic, following paw prints on the ground or feathers snagged on branches. Joel's past as a hunter would be priceless in a world like this. Think of Bill's ingenious traps against infected animals. That system would need even more creativity. Maybe you lay bait to lure infected wolves into a blast zone, or use noise charges to drive a bird swarm straight into enemy lines. And stealth. Open combat would be suicide most of the time. You can down a clicker with a blade, but what do you do against an infected bear or bull? The game's tempo would become far more tense and cautious. You'd lie low in tall grass, smear yourself with mud to mask your scent, even factor in the direction of the wind. Remember the giraffe scene in Salt Lake City from Part 1, when Joel and Ellie saw nature renewing itself. That moment gave us all hope. Even if humanity disappeared, life would find a way. But in a world where animals are infected, that scene would carry a completely different meaning. Nature isn't rebounding. Nature is reminding us who truly owns the planet. While humanity arrogantly crowned itself the top of the chain, nature simply watched. Fungi, animals, forests, all of it finds a way to exist without us. If such a catastrophe had happened, the story would take very different paths, but the message would remain the same: humanity's frailty in the face of nature's absolute power. A Cordyceps apocalypse may never happen, but if it did, nature wouldn't be seeking revenge. It would simply do what it was always going to do.
Do you think the world of The Last of Us could withstand such a catastrophe? What would our chances of survival be against an infected predator or a flock of birds? Or would this scenario make the game even more hopeless? Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments, like the video, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more scenarios like this.
Come on.
Hey there.
So, is this everything you were hoping for?
It's got its ups and downs, but you can't deny the view, though.